Hi, I'm John Glynn. I'm going to be doing today a quick video, I hope, on selections. So we're going to select and do layers and move this particular flower. We're going to select the flower, we're going to create a layer of the flower, and we can then do a layer copy. So this is going to be a layer copy, and we're going to be able to move it around this photo and ultimately move it to another photograph. But I'm going to do this over a couple of lessons rather than trying to do it all in one. So the first thing I'm going to do, however, is, now that I've chosen my photograph, is make a selection. And I'm going to use for this in the quick selection tool, which is in the toolbox, and looks like a brush with a wand around it. But if you put your mouse over it, it will say quick selection tool. Now, depending what version of Photoshop you have, this will either have information at the top of your picture about what you can and cannot do with the tool, or if it's Photoshop Elements, it will be at the bottom of your monitor. Below the photograph, you'll see options to do with the tools that are available to you and what you can change. So the actual size of the brush, for instance, in this case is very small. You can make it bigger if you so wish. I can do that at the top, and I can make a bigger brush. The bigger the brush, the more or less, the less control you have over what happens with the brush, but the easier it is to see. So all I'm going to do then is put my mouse over the top of my photograph, and you'll see that there's I'll make the brush a little bit bigger so you can actually see it. There's a brush, and I'm going to hold down the left mouse key and start dragging my mouse around the photograph. And as I move my mouse around the photograph, it will, the actual selection will look for an edge. It's not looking for a sharp edge or anything. It's actually looking for contrast. It's all about tonal ranges. So if you've got a definite difference between background and foreground, as I have here, then it's very easy for the brush to actually find that edge. If the tonal ranges are very similar, then you'll find that it will over select. Okay, so you may have to make corrections after you've made the selection. I've chosen a fairly straightforward image here to speed the whole process up. But if you're unsure or want to correct or clean up edges, then the best thing is to zoom in. You can zoom into a particular area. I'm using the navigator tool, which you get from Window in the top toolbar, and you can see that in my cursor, if you can see my cursor here, as you zoom in, your brushes become bigger in relationship to the number of pixels you're using. You can see a little plus square, little plus sign in the middle. And if I hold down the Alt key on my keyboard, I'm using a PC, and you'll have an Alt key on a Mac as well, I can then do the alternative, and I can push things in, plus will push them out. So if I work on the inside, I can enlarge my selection. If I work on the outside and use the alternative key, which is the minus, I can refine my selection and make it smaller. So by going round the edges, you can push and pull your selection to fit the areas you're wanting to do. So, and if your brush is too big, because as you zoom in, your brush will effectively become bigger in relationship to the number of pixels you're using, you may have to resize the brush and make it smaller. And then again, Alt key allows me to push these corners in a bit, and I could do that all the way around and refine the edges of my selection if I so wish. Okay, I think that's a little bit better. You will have other options with selection. Depending what version you've got, you will have the option to select and mask, as in this version, or just refine edges. In Photoshop Elements, it's refine edges, which means that you can just clean up the edges and soften the edges of your image so it's not too harsh. Okay, you have a play with that, but that's not specifically for this session. This session is really about making a selection, And then what we're going to do, once I've made my selection, I'm going to copy it. So here's my selection. It's around the flower, and I'm going to now go up to the layer option in the tool panel at the top. So the tools at the top of my picture area, it's got layer. If I click on layer and go to new, I can then go to layer via copy, and if I click on layer via copy, the marquee will now vanish. Now what I'm going to do now is come out of my quick selection tool and click on my move tool in the toolbox, and I get a border, a bounding box to show what area of the picture I have selected. I've selected more than just the flower effectively, but in fact it is only the flower that will move, not the background. Okay, and so now I got the option of moving this flower to another part of this photograph. What I've done is copy it. The actual flower that I've copied from is still underneath, and all I'm doing is holding down the left mouse key on a PC and dragging, and it allows me to move the cursor around and the flower around, and I can move it to another part of the photograph. But because in the bounding box you'll see that there are little anchor points, those anchor points allows me to resize the picture, and if I hold down, in my version of Photoshop, if I hold down the shift key and I go to a corner, I can keep the picture in proportion so I don't distort the image, and I can make it smaller or I can make it bigger. If I go to an edge, and I'll just move the whole thing over slightly, I can hold down my cursor and I can actually go the other way with the photograph, and there you can see now that I've actually inverted it, and I can actually also drag it down and make it upside down if I want. So various options to it. It's a very strange thing. It allows you to play around with your picture quite in interesting ways, which may make the image more or less interesting depending on what you're wanting to do with your photograph. And of course I've got that one. I can go back to my background, click on, well, in my version of Photoshop, by the way, to all I do is double click inside the box to fix it. In Photoshop Elements you'll have a little plus or a tick, a green tick at the bottom, which you tick, and it will make the action fixed if you like. You can always change the action as often as you like. If I click the background in Layers palette, the marquee will vanish. If you want to see it before and after the effect, if you click on the magic eye, it will vanish in Layers palette. If you click the eye back again, you'll see the photograph will return. So in your Layers palette, which is, I'll just drag it out so it's more easy to see, there you have the eye on and off effect, and you can click on the layer again and you get the bounding box, which allows you to resize and play around with the distortion of it, the shape of it, whatever you're wanting to do with it. Okay, so the thing to do is to have a go and see what you think. You can duplicate these layers, you can make copies of copies as often as you like. So if I wanted to, I could just go to duplicate layer, click the right mouse key and duplicate layer, and I've got another version of the same thing, and I can be playing around with that as often as I wish, and I could have lots of flowers. And I could duplicate the layer again and have another flower. And there we are. So you can be having lots of little flowers all over your photograph. Very, very simply, you make a selection, go to layer, layer, new, layer via copy when you've made your selection. Okay, have a go, and it is quite good fun. Okay, thank you for watching.